Hi, I'm Aidan from Mysteries Ahoy, and join me today as I give you my top 5 reasons why I love Basil the Great Mouse Detective. So previously in this series, I've given you reasons why I love The Third Man and How to Steal a Million. Obviously, The Great Mouse Detective is a very different sort of film. After all, it is a Disney kids animated movie. It was my first step, though, into the world of mystery stories, and it introduced me to the character of Sherlock Holmes, a character who, for many people, is a gateway into that world of mystery fiction. The film was inspired by the works of Eve Titus, an American author, who wrote the Basil of Baker Street books. Now, this film doesn't actually adapt any one in the series. Rather, it takes the basic ideas and the characters, and it creates its own original storyline. The premise of the books, and indeed of the movie, is that Basil lives in the same house as Sherlock Holmes. So let's get things started with my first reason I love this film. It takes place in the Sherlock Holmes universe. This is established right at the start of the film, where we see Dawson arrive at Baker Street, and the camera pans down from Sherlock Holmes at his window to the entrance to Basil's home. The idea here is slightly different than the books. In the books, Basil and Dawson have moved together to Baker Street to try and start a new life there where they can learn from the teachings of Sherlock Holmes. He is already a disciple. In the movie, Dawson meets Basil for the first time at his home, more like Watson meets Holmes in the start of A Study in Scarlet. The idea here is that Basil is already established as a great detective, and therefore Dawson is kind of an outsider for this adventure. Now, there are lots of different references to the world of Sherlock Holmes within the story, but I want to draw your attention to two in particular that delight me. The first is that you can actually hear the voice of Basil Rathbone, who at that point was probably the most famous actor to have donned the deerstalker. It's taken from an audiobook recording he did of one of the stories, and this helps really identify that Basil is in that universe for many film fans. The other thing that I really love is that it features the character of Toby in quite a prominent role. Now, Toby is a dog that Holmes uses to track a scent in the story The Sign of Fall. As a kid, I was unaware that this was a familiar character, but when I grew up, I was delighted to discover that there was this link between the movie and the original core texts. Of course, it's not just these elements that evoke that realm of Holmes and Watson, but that also comes through strongly in the characters of our two heroes. Barry Ingham is fantastic as the voice of Basil the Great Mouse Detective. I think he manages to combine that sense that he is deeply, piercingly intelligent, and also that idea that he's occasionally insensitive. But an important difference is that while he is insensitive towards Dawson at points, he is not insensitive ultimately towards the young child that he has to help in this story. Just as Holmes has his Watson, Basil has his Dawson. Now, Dawson is similarly a medical figure returned from Afghanistan. He very directly references the Watson character, and he's cut in the Nigel Bruce mould. So he's kind of bumbling, he's a source of comedy. That isn't my favourite interpretation of the character of Watson, but it's completely appropriate for a kids' film. Where Basil is a little bit dangerous, Dawson is safe and familiar. He reassures the viewer that everything is going to be all right. He's also a voice of moral conviction, helping set Basil back on the right path at a crucial point in the story. So while he doesn't do a lot in terms of detection, he is inherently important to this story. This brings me to the next thing that I love about this film, its strong sense of place and time. When I saw this for the first time, I had no idea what Victoriana was. I couldn't have described it, and I couldn't have recognised what I saw as fitting into that model. What I did know, though, is that this is a deeply atmospheric film that has a lot of mood and that conveys a strong sense of both time and place. This is shown in some of the ways that various scenes are animated. There's a sense of murkiness, that idea of gaslight and fog pervading. This gives a very strong sense of place and atmosphere that helps distinguish this film from some of the previous films that have been made during what's often referred to as the wilderness years or the dark era of Disney movies. This atmosphere is particularly effective in an extended sequence set inside a toy shop that unnerved me as a child and still sort of freaks me out today. The film also takes us to a few recognisable London landmarks. We go to Big Ben, where we have an elaborate animated sequence that is the first extensive use of computer-generated imagery in a Disney movie. We also have an extended sequence that takes place at Buckingham Palace. Finally, you also see some of the technological innovations of the era. You have things like the gramophone, the airship, and also the idea of clockwork being used extensively, which is a really important part of the plot in this story. Now, speaking of gramophones, let me introduce the next thing I love about this film. It's music. While The Great Mouse Detective isn't bursting with songs the way that many later Disney films would be, it does feature a gorgeous musical score by Henry Mancini, as well as 3 distinctive musical numbers. Let Me Be Good to You is a sort of brassy burlesque number that is best remembered for Dawson cavorting around drunkenly on stage as a result of something being slipped into his drink. Here, admittedly, we diverge a little from that sense of Victorian atmosphere. Originally, Mancini had planned to do a musical-style number, which would have felt much more appropriate to the time. But it was felt that this would be a little outdated and hard for young people to understand. Some of the early suggestions for who could sing this song included Michael Jackson and Madonna, but eventually they decided to use Melissa Manchester, and she gives the song a fun and lively energy. My favourite part of any Disney film, though, are the villain songs, and what makes The Great Mouse Detective particularly enjoyable for me is that we actually get 2 of them here. The first is a wonderful drinking song in which Ratigan and his henchmen all introduce the character, and there are lots of fun little remarks about the different capers and crimes he's committed that help build up the character, but perhaps what's most memorable is the way that the song ends, giving us our first sense of just how dangerous a villain Ratigan can be. The other song is much more whimsical, and we don't actually hear it in full in the film. Goodbye So Soon plays on a record player, as Basil is in peril. One of the things that delights me most about this is the idea that Ratigan has recorded a novelty single in order to torment our hero. It's a really catchy song. In fact, my daughter has requested this over and over again since we watched the film, and is a regular part of our drive to school at the moment. This brings me, I suppose, to our last topic, Vincent Price. Now, clearly here I am saving the best to last, because Vincent Price is an absolute hoot in this film. Price has a really expressive voice. It's urbane and menacing, it's sinister and smooth. It manages to indicate someone who is conveying an image of themselves, while also hinting at their true nature underneath, which is a perfect idea for this character. Price really terrified me when I was younger. As frightening as he is at the end, where he breaks out and he becomes aggressive, I think his most frightening moments are actually when he's pulling back, when he is choosing to withhold his true nature. And that idea really sticks with me. I think that that little moment where he raises his bell and tingles it in the alleyway is truly sinister and quite terrifying. At least it terrified me when I was younger. Obviously, I felt that Ratigan was a very effective villain, but I think Disney felt so as well, because when you look at the films they commissioned afterwards, you see that a number of the villains share a lot in common with Ratigan. They similarly sound very sophisticated, very dry, and often have that idea that they are masking a true nature that is a little more feral behind something that appears more sophisticated. Think about Jafar in Aladdin, or Scar in The Lion King, or maybe Judge Frollo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. All of these characters are in the same key as Ratigan, and I think that that is a recognition of just how effective Price is here. I find him tremendous fun. He is actually a lot more entertaining than Moriarty ever is, and I think of this character as one of the best things about this film. He's certainly the thing I enjoy coming back to again and again. So there you have it. Those are my 5 reasons I love The Great Mouse Detective. Let me know in the comments below if you like this film, and if so, what are some of your favourite moments or elements? And I'll see you next time. Thank you.